What kind of killer stays inside a murder house? At 10:30 p.m., lights still glowed inside the Miyazawa home. Neighbors heard nothing. No screams, no alarms. Hours later, 4 bodies lay upstairs and downstairs. Yet the killer hadn't fled. He lingered, ate food, used the toilet, and walked away unseen.
He behaved like time didn't matter, like no one would stop him.
Police would later say this was a perfect storm of silence. But silence can be staged. Doors weren't forced. Valuables weren't taken. And the killer didn't rush. He moved like someone unafraid of interruption. Investigators asked the wrong question first. How did he escape? Instead of why he never hurried at all. Who were the Miyazawas before they became a headline? Mikio Miyazawa, a company employee. Yasuko, devoted mother. Nina, 8. Rei, 6. Friends described routines, not secrets. No criminal ties, no debts. Their home sat beside Setagaya Park, open, peaceful, almost exposed. Which raises the first contradiction. Why this family?
They lived openly. Nothing about them felt hidden or dangerous.
Police framed them as random victims. But random crimes don't leave this level of confidence behind. Someone knew the layout. Someone knew the neighborhood slept deeply. The official story says wrong place, wrong time. Quietly, detectives questioned whether the family's normalcy was exactly what made them vulnerable, or whether it hid something undisclosed. What happened between evening and midnight? Nina was attacked first. Downstairs, blood evidence shows interruption. Upstairs, Mikio fought back. The killer used multiple weapons. This wasn't efficient. It was messy, personal, prolonged, yet no neighbors intervened. Investigators say it was fast. The wounds argue otherwise.
A scene suggests pauses. That's not panic, that's decision-making.
Officially, police say the killer panicked. But panicked killers don't finish meals afterward. They don't change clothes. They don't sit. Forensics suggest breaks between attacks. Time passed. Enough time to think. Enough time to reconsider. Which raises the unsettling possibility. This wasn't rage. It was control pretending to be chaos. Why leave evidence everywhere and still vanish? The killer left blood, fingerprints, shoe prints, clothing fibers, even feces. He used the family computer, ate their food, slept briefly. DNA didn't match any database. Police called it luck. Critics called it negligence because some samples degraded before international testing was prioritized.
This case has too much evidence to still have no suspect.
The official narrative says science failed, but critics argue procedure failed first. Why weren't foreign databases engaged immediately? Why was the killer's profile released selectively? Why did investigators resist outsider review? Evidence existed in abundance, yet somehow led nowhere. The contradiction isn't absence of proof. It's excess without accountability. The public was told this was an unsolvable mystery. Media emphasized the foreign DNA angle, steering attention outward. A faceless outsider. But behind closed doors, detectives debated local familiarity. Someone who blended in. Someone overlooked. The louder the foreigner theory became, the quieter internal doubts grew.
When a theory comforts authorities, it quietly replaces the truth.
Once the narrative set, questioning it became dangerous. Admitting tunnel vision meant admitting years lost. So the case froze, active but unchanged. Families demanded answers. Police promised progress. Neither came, and the question still hangs. Was the killer truly unknown, or simply protected by the story everyone agreed to tell? Why did police emphasize a foreign suspect so quickly? DNA analysis suggested mixed ancestry, possibly Korean or European. Media seized it. Headlines shifted suspicion outward. Yet Tokyo hosts millions of visitors. This wasn't narrowing focus, it was expanding uncertainty. Internally, some investigators warned the theory explained everything and nothing at once.
Once we said foreigner, people stopped looking close to home.
Officially, the foreign DNA meant international cooperation was needed. Unofficially, it stalled momentum. Tips slowed, local scrutiny faded. Critics argue the theory became a shield, protecting investigators from harder questions about neighborhood access, routine surveillance gaps, and overlooked witnesses. When suspicion points everywhere, responsibility points nowhere. How does a killer enter and leave unnoticed? The Miyazawa house sat near a park, footpaths, and skate areas. Locals moved freely at night. Yet police reported no reliable witnesses, no confirmed sightings. Critics question whether interviews were rushed or filtered to fit assumptions already forming about an outsider.
There were people around that night. Silence wasn't normal.
Investigators later admitted some witness statements conflicted. Footsteps, movement, a man seen nearby earlier. None followed aggressively. The contradiction remains. Either no one saw anything, or what was seen didn't align with the emerging narrative. In true crime, ignored witnesses don't disappear. They wait. Why use multiple weapons? A sashimi knife from the home, a metal object brought by the killer. This wasn't convenience, it was escalation. Analysts debated whether this showed improvisation or intent. Official reports leaned toward chaos. Critics saw rehearsal, adapting tools while maintaining control.
This wasn't sloppy. It was flexible. That's more danger.
Even clothing evidence confused investigators. The killer's sweater fibers traced to rare distribution paths. Shoes linked to limited manufacturers. None led to arrests. The question lingered. Were leads exhausted or simply not pursued far enough? Forensics didn't contradict the case. They complicated it. What happens when years pass without arrests? Detectives retire, teams rotate, institutional memory fades. The case stays open, but momentum dies quietly. Families keep asking, police keep reviewing, yet nothing fundamentally changes. Critics argue this wasn't lack of evidence. It was erosion of urgency.
Time didn't erase evidence, it erased precedent.
Appeals were made. Rewards increased, posters reprinted. But without new direction, repetition replaced investigation. The killer aged, or died, or watched coverage unfold calmly. The legal system didn't fail loudly. It slowed until failure felt normal. And normalization is the enemy of justice. Why is this still discussed decades later? Because it breaks rules. Too much DNA, too much access, too much time spent inside the crime scene, and still, no suspect. Every explanation solves one question and creates three more. True crime communities keep digging because the official story feels unfinished.
This case resists closure because it resists simple answers.
The contradiction remains unresolved. If the killer was foreign, how did he vanish so completely? If local, why was scrutiny redirected? And if evidence was sufficient, why did it lead nowhere? Until those questions align, the Setagaya murders remain not a mystery, but a challenge to belief. Why were certain suspects quietly dismissed? Delivery workers, former neighbors, park regulars, names surfaced, then vanished. Police logged them, cleared them, moved on, no explanations released. Critics note background checks were shallow, alibis loosely verified. The official record shows closure. The gaps suggest convenience, not certainty, guiding investigative decisions rather than pursuing uncomfortable lines of inquiry.
Clearing suspects was faster than reopening theories we'd already committed to.
Officially, all persons of interest were ruled out. Unofficially, documents revealed timelines adjusted to fit statements. Minor inconsistencies were labeled irrelevant. Detectives defended efficiency. But efficiency can hide avoidance. When questioning threatens earlier assumptions, elimination becomes protection. The question remains whether suspects were cleared by evidence or by fatigue, accumulated institutional pressure, reputation, and irreversible commitment. How does the most famous DNA case go nowhere? The killer's profile was rare, detailed, and traceable. Yet years passed without a match. International databases expanded, still nothing. Supporters say science failed. Critics argue access lagged. Early delays meant missed comparisons. DNA ages poorly. Time didn't just pass, it damaged opportunity permanently.
DNA can solve cases, but only if urgency comes before hesitation.
Police insist DNA remains the strongest hope, but hope isn't strategy. Experts questioned why advanced sequencing wasn't prioritized earlier. Others warned contamination risks from prolonged scene exposure. Each year, confidence faded quietly. The contradiction endures. DNA powerful enough to identify, yet managed carefully enough to never accuse. Was this caution or paralysis disguised as prudence? What happens when a theory hardens too early? Investigators centered on an unknown outsider. Every clue bent toward that frame. Contradictory details were softened. delayed, or deprioritized. Tunnel vision doesn't announce itself, it settles gradually. By the time alternatives surface, the case structure resists change, protecting itself rather than pursuing truth.
Once direction was set, questioning it felt like disloyalty.
Official reviews denied bias. Yet internal memos show discomfort with dissenting views. Junior officers raised concerns. They went nowhere. Reopening angles meant admitting mistakes. Institutions rarely reward that. Instead, momentum favors preservation. The investigation didn't collapse, it calcified. And once hardened, even strong evidence struggles to penetrate accepted belief. Why did legal urgency disappear? No arrests meant no trials. No trials meant no scrutiny. Prosecutors stayed distant, citing incomplete identification. Critics argue this created a vacuum. Without courtroom pressure, investigative missteps avoided exposure. The law waited for certainty. Certainty never arrived. And without legal friction, inertia quietly replaced momentum.
Without court pressure, investigations rarely challenge themselves.
Cold cases survive on review. But reviews here produced repetition, not revision. Evidence was rechecked, not reinterpreted. No independent task force forced confrontation with past decisions. The legal system didn't block progress, it simply never demanded it. And unanswered questions remain safely outside cross-examination, where contradictions usually surface. So why does Setagaya still disturb investigators? Because nothing aligns cleanly. A meticulous crime with careless leftovers. A stranger comfortable inside. Evidence abundant, progress absent. Every explanation contradicts another. The case resists narrative closure, and resistance suggests something unresolved, not missing information, but misinterpreted decisions made early and defended too long.
Unsolved doesn't always mean unknowable. Sometimes it means unchallenged.
The official story says, the killer vanished. The counter story suggests he was lost in process. Between assumptions, delays, and institutional fear, the truth slipped through gaps no one wanted to acknowledge. The haunting possibility remains. The mystery isn't who committed the murders, but when the investigation quietly stopped asking the right questions. When science meets uncertainty, whose interpretation prevails? Forensic experts disputed sequence of attacks, entry points, even time of death. Each reconstruction contradicted another. Police favored the least challenging version. But truth rarely fits convenience. Behind technical jargon lay rivalry. Departments defending credibility, not clarity. Every conclusion seemed scientifically sound, yet politically safer than honest confusion.
Science spoke clearly. The system just preferred quieter translation.
Independent analysts re-examining files decades later found overlooked inconsistencies. Blood patterns mismatched statements. Fiber origins misclassified. Temperature estimates ignored. Experts disagreed not on data, but on courage to challenge hierarchy. Science can expose truth or protect status. The Setagaya case revealed how evidence becomes interpretation, and interpretation becomes armor against institutional embarrassment. How did headlines shape the investigation's memory? Early coverage sensationalized brutality, but simplified context. Photographs framed grief, not inquiry. Networks competed for emotion, not accuracy. Reporters echoed police narratives word for word. Viewers received storylines of horror without structure. Fear sold better than nuance, and public empathy replaced public pressure for accountability.
Truth competes poorly against stories that already feel complete.
Later documentaries sought redemption through retrospection, but rarely contradiction. Producers favored closure. Mystery sells stability. Yet behind every narration sat unasked questions about ignored witnesses, delayed forensics, missing timelines. Media didn't fabricate lies, it curated comfort. The Setagaya murders became less about facts, more about the illusion that someone still controlled the narrative. Public outrage once burned bright. Thousands attended vigils, demanded justice, trusted the system. But years dull memory. Familiar faces move on. New scandals replace old. The family's tragedy turned folklore. Society remembers crime scenes longer than victims. When outrage fades faster than investigation, momentum shifts from empathy to endurance, truth to tolerance.
When attention ends, justice loses its audience.
Petitions continued online. Anniversary articles resurfaced briefly, then disappeared again. Apathy grew camouflaged as acceptance. Politicians offered condolences instead of commitments. Citizens assumed progress. Unseen equaled progress achieved. Collective fatigue became collective permission to forget. The Setagaya case didn't fade naturally. It was gently allowed to vanish beneath headlines promising safety already disproved. Could cultural restraint protect failure? Japanese policing values harmony and hierarchy. Confrontation risks dishonor. Reinvestigating seniors' decisions feels disrespectful. So contradictions remain unspoken, disguised as respect. Silence becomes policy. Outsiders call it inefficiency, insiders call it duty. Between both lies a truth unvoiced. Deference may preserve order, but it also preserves mistakes.
Respect sometimes silences the very honesty justice requires.
When accountability conflicts with dignity, institutions choose dignity. That choice defines this case more than any clue. No villainous cover-up, just politeness calcified. Investigators retire quietly, successors inherit hesitance. The Setagaya file survives not as scandal, but as symptom of a culture where saving face often outweighs facing truth. Two decades later, the house still stands sealed. Evidence boxes sleep under dust. Visitors speak in whispers. Technology improved, but willpower did not. Every detail needed for closure already exists within those walls. Yet each official return to the scene ends in repetition. The crime remains unsolved because the questions have stopped evolving while the truth stays patient. History now treats Setagaya as ghost lesson. Investigations age like people, harden like beliefs. DNA waits, paper yellows, faces blur. The case no longer asks who killed the Miyazawas, but why a nation could accept not knowing. Perhaps the killer hid in plain sight. Or perhaps the real escape was emotional, a collective decision to prefer mystery over accountability.